The main goal of DevSecOps is identifying and fixing security issues as early as possible in the development cycle. There are two main considerations to keep in mind here. The first one is that it is a relatively new approach to software development. The second is that DevSecOps involves different stakeholders, including DevOps professionals, security teams, and developers. Starting with these two facts, let's explore their implications and how DevSecOps is likely in crisis today. When a software engineering team adopts cloud-native, DevOps, GitOps, observability, and platform engineering approaches, all teams, including developers, should be involved. This is part of the shared responsibility model and other philosophies. Integrating new tools and platforms requires a learning curve for each. Now, if you add DevSecOps to the list, new tools are required. As part of the shift-left approach of DevSecOps, developers find themselves using or dealing with additional tools like SAST and DAST tools and many others. This challenge is not unique to DevSecOps, but there is a significant technical burden associated with its tooling. Developers today rely on a multitude of tools, resulting in an abundance of complexity and difficulty in managing them. In addition to coding, versioning, automation, integration, deployment, and cloud tools, developers should now adopt additional tools as part of their shared responsibility for security. This can be hard for many to deal with. The technical overload mentioned earlier brings us to another issue: the lack of qualified personnel in a rapidly changing environment. According to some reports, almost 70% of organizations lack a sufficient understanding of DevSecOps practices. This is compounded by a lack of staff. Developer and DevOps teams often lack the technical expertise to adequately assess the security of the systems they are responsible for. At the same time, finding qualified security personnel who can keep up with the rapidly changing landscape of DevOps, cloud-native, and software development can be difficult. The lack of qualified personnel can be a particularly vexing challenge for all teams who desire to deliver secure software effectively and rapidly at the same time. This is probably the reason why the adoption rate of DevSecOps is not high enough to be considered a mainstream approach today. And that's the next challenge we're going to discuss. In 2022, according to a report by Mesmo, only 22% of respondent organizations had developed a formal DevSecOps strategy integrating security into software development lifecycle processes. Business adoption of an approach increases the likelihood of its ecosystem becoming standardized and easier for other organizations to adopt. However, DevSecOps' current adoption rates do not reflect this. As a result, this methodology is stuck in the middle of an adoption crisis despite its potential. This crisis is exacerbated by a lack of clarity regarding who should take action in an organization adopting DevSecOps. This leads us to another challenge: responsibility. In terms of responsibility, the main controversy surrounding DevSecOps is that there is disagreement over who should be responsible for ensuring the security of software in a DevSecOps environment. While some believe that security should be the sole responsibility of the security team, others believe that it should be a shared responsibility among development, security, and operations teams. Proponents of shared responsibility argue that DevSecOps requires a cultural shift in which all teams work together to ensure security, rather than relying solely on the security team to identify and remediate vulnerabilities. Critics, on the other hand, argue that relying on development and operations teams to take on security responsibilities can result in a lack of expertise and a failure to prioritize security. They also point out that development and operations teams may not have the necessary resources or time to properly address security concerns, especially if they are already stretched thin with other tasks. Both sides seem to have convincing arguments, so how should an organization approach this issue? That's a real challenge. The more we rely on software, the more critical software engineering becomes and the more complexity engineers and developers face. There is no doubt that DevSecOps has its merits, just like DevOps, platform engineering, GitOps, CI/CD, observability, microservices, and the list is long. The problem with DevSecOps is not in the methodology itself, but in the fact that software engineers in our world are having a real overload of shared responsibilities. Software is eating the world, but software engineering is probably eating its professionals. That was 5 Minutes DevSecOps. Don't forget to join our developer community using the links in the description. See you tomorrow.